Hey everyone, Trent here. Welcome to the Fandom Zone. Rambo Last Blood is out in cinemas everywhere, directed by Adrian Grunberg and starring Sylvester Stallone as the Tortilla John Rambo, Vietnam War vet. He's back for a fifth round, and it is super bloody. I enjoyed every second I was in this movie. Well, most of the movie. It is very fun. And that's a great thing to say when you're in a critics screening with other media personalities and everyone gets involved in it and they're like, oh yeah. That's what this movie was like, and I loved every second of it. It's going to be one of my top action movies of the year. But moving on, this is going to be a spoiler-free review. I'm just going to give you a brief overview of what I enjoyed, what I didn't. You can tell I actually really enjoyed it, so that's always a good sign. Anyway, the story sees John Rambo back on his ranch, which we saw at the end of the fourth movie, and he's had a makeshift family with Maria Beltran, who is a groundskeeper and family friend with his niece Gabrielle. He's developed this really big kinship with them, and he sees them as their family. Now, one of the interesting things that goes on is you see John dealing with his post-traumatic stress disorder based on his Vietnam War experiences, and we get some really good callbacks to earlier movies where we see that affect him. And this is really strong and really powerful imagery throughout, especially the first half of the movie where you see him dealing with the effects of this. He's built tunnels underneath his ranch, and it's kind of like him still holding on to the past as a soldier while trying to be this really protective and caring father figure to Gabrielle, who is his innocence in the world. Now, unfortunately, he gets embroiled with the Martinez brothers, a cartel down in Mexico, and unfortunately, it hits the fan, and it then goes on John being full vengeful and vendetta, and it's wonderful. Unfortunately, the circumstances surrounding it are not as wonderful. That's all I can go into detail with the story about without giving away anything. There's a lot of focus in this movie on building the family relationship, particularly John's relationship to Gabrielle, who's played by Yvette Monreal. They play off each other really well, and you can really see Sly's character actually caring for this girl, and you see just how much she means to him. Now, Sergio Perez Mencheta and Oscar Gendena as Victor and Hugo Martinez, I'm sorry, swap that around, Hugo and Victor Martinez, they were really good, and Sergio actually looks a lot like Jon Snow. They were really strong. They had some great moments and some really, they were brutal as cartel leaders, and you could just see how much they controlled Mexico. And it caused a lot of grief and a lot of harm to John. It's really good. There were some great moments, and there was also some good dynamics between the brothers as well. Like, they're both struggling for power. But the strength was more so, instead of the violence, it was more so on the relationship between John and Gabrielle, and that plays a really important role in the movie, and the decisions that occur and the events that transpire after it. Now, there were actually some genuinely, I actually got stunned by a few moments in this movie. I thought they were going to go one direction and they went the complete opposite, and it made the emotions and the scenes much more powerful because of it. We got the typical Rambo monologue, where he's talking about the loss of innocence and the way the war has affected him, and it was just really well done. The pacing may not be what everyone wants to begin with. It is not as violent as many people are probably going to be expecting in the first half, but there are some brutal moments. For instance, and this is just pure awesome, he rips into a guy's shoulder and pulls out his clavicle and uses it as a torture device. It's brutal, it's visceral, it's impactful, it's fucking unreal. And that's all done with practical practical effects. No CGI, well, maybe a little bit of CGI, but it's so lifelike and it's so powerful. You don't actually need to see any other over-the-top grotesque violence. It's just because everyone knows how much a broken clavicle hurts. And to see that happen with just a little, bone fragment, it has that much more impact. And there's other moments, there's some really great cutting and editing in this that makes the audience feel what they should be feeling at the right time, as well as callbacks. They show little pieces of items like jewelry and things, and then it's playing another role later on. Like, there's one point where one of the cartel bosses picks up a needle, and instantaneously you know that it's heroin and you know something terrible is going to happen. There's just some really smart and clever writing in this that makes the audience go along with the journey and feel what they should do. Another thing that's done well is the use of silence and building suspense throughout various scenes. It is done very impactful early on. It's about incidents that occur to Sly, and in the later half of the movie, there are incidents that are occurring to the bad guys that you think, holy crap, I don't know what's going to happen, when it's going to happen. You know something's going to happen, but it's Sly in control. That's something that you very seldom see in a movie. It's normally the protagonist who's facing tremendous odds, but that's flipped on its head here, and we feel suspense and tension for the bad guys because we know they're just going to get absolutely decimated by Rambo at some point. And that was some really clever editing and some really clever use of screen time and silence. Like, there was no music playing in various points, but the impact was still there because you were gripped to the edge of your seat by what you were seeing, and it was wonderful. Now, what everyone's going to be wondering is, how violent is it? This is brutal. This is one of the most brutal movies of the year and of the last decade, especially the final third. It is gruesome. And one of the best things about this is that you see a lot of it. You see probably 90% of it, and it is over the top. It is brutal. In the fourth one, he's mowing people down with the Gatling gun. This is even more brutal because it's just homemade, handmade crap. It's literally homemade wooden pikes and spikes and detonators, bear traps, anything that he can get his hands on, using it as a weapon. And there's the good old-fashioned green arrow bow. But this is brutal. It's amazing. The final half of the movie just hits the accelerator and it goes. You will know the point that I'm referring to because it happens after a very, very strong moment. And then it's boom, Rambo's in action. So I really enjoyed it. The music is excellent. We get the Arizona wilderness, the mountains, the cliffs. You get the good old-fashioned horseback riding. It is a beautiful movie. And then you see the grimy, kind of dirty streets of Mexico that I'm sure are played up. I've never been there, but you see that it's a desolate area that they're in and dealing with. But just that parallel instantly, it kind of brings the movie right down into that violent nature. There's a really great montage where you see the cartel bosses gearing up with all their technical weapons, and Rambo sharpening a stick and his pikes just with a knife. So it's a great contrast, some really clever writing, and some really great editing. Now, this is a very good character study for PTSD and how it can affect a war veteran. Sly does a great job. It's explored really well in the first half of the movie. I do wish it was explored more so in the second half. It's kind of ignored and pushed away. It would have been really great if we got a few more nods and a few more moments to seeing how he's dealing with that, because he's suppressing the beast for the first half of the movie and then it gets unleashed in the second half. But it would have been nice to kind of see the tics and triggers that we were presented with in the first part of the movie continue on in the second half. That's where I felt the movie staggered a little bit. It was just, it wanted to be something in the first half of the movie that was really character driven, and then it became the action movie. It would have been nice to see a little bit more of a blend and how the actions and consequences of Rambo trying to escape his military background, but ultimately he's brought back into the conflict. It would have been nice to see that, explore that a little bit more, but that's just me. This is a great final outing. If it is a final outing, it gives a lot of closure, and it's a really, really strong performance from Sly, who does a great job. I personally love this movie. I'm going to give it a 9 out of 10. I enjoyed it more than John Wick 3, and I love John Wick 3. This is my action movie of the year so far. So, yeah, let me know your thoughts on Rambo Last Blood in the comments below. What did you think of it? Did you think it was necessary? Do you want to see more of John back in Sly? I know I wouldn't be opposed to it, but this is the perfect finish to it, and yeah, it comes full circle. But yeah, let me know your thoughts in the comments. I'm Trent. Follow our handles at Fandom Zone AUS, and as always, keep it nerdy.